wants to be liked. Look at our whole social media is based on likes. Some complete stranger that you'll never encounter with that has no impact on your life. But man, you get a like, you're liked, what you're thinking is liked, all of a sudden you have value. And but the idea is like not everyone's gonna like you. And if you try to strive for like, you won't be effective. But if you strive to be respected, where if you're comfortable with that and bring people in to foster understanding, they might not like the decision, but they'll respect you. That's the best you can hope for. And generally, if you're respected, I think you'll be liked by the right people.
Welcome to The Climb, where I help Christian men live fully, lead boldly, and leave a legacy that matters. I'm your host, Teko Bailey, husband, father, life coach, and your guide in the climb. Whether you're navigating fatherhood, building a business, or simply longing to live more purpose, this is a space to rise. Do you guys go camping or anything during the summer?
Yeah, actually, we're big outdoors people. My wife and I, we've been married 27, going on 28 years. We've been camping since the day we started dating. We've had a tent/travel trailer for 20 years, which we still have, but we just bought a cottage at the end of June. So we're making that transition. My kids are 23 and 21, and camping with mom and dad isn't as cool anymore.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. So camping is very cool right now with a 8-year-old and a 6-year-old.
That's the perfect time. And it was important for us, especially when they were younger. It's like, look, a big part of who I am is my family taking me out camping, and we'd rent cottages. Summer was about really engaging with the outdoors. And so
Absolutely.
we live in such a highly digitized, technologically dependent world. I'm like, nope, we're going out there. They can bring their iPad phones, but to their credit, they're out there doing their thing and they're not on their electronics. And it just made them like they would go to camp for a week or two, and they would go canoeing and camp overnight on islands. They just really embraced the outdoors. And I like to think it was a big part of exposing them at a very early age to say, you need to get into this. You can't just live in a concrete jungle as a city.
I like that. What do you think or as a dad, what inspired you to invest some of those times with your family and kind of just, I know not everybody does it.
Yeah.
So what led you to kind of doing some of that with your family and encouraging them in that direction?
I mean, I think we're all a function of two things, nature and nurture, right? So I grew up in a very tight-knit family where my dad was um, was there coaching my hockey teams. My dad was there coaching my baseball teams. My mom actually was more of the camper, and she would take us camping, and my dad would come up on the weekends, kind of thing like that. But so, you know, and then my dad passed when he was 67. I was 30. And I remember just thinking to myself, my memories of my dad aren't the things he got me, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't really tell you. I mean, I think there was, the odd Christmas present here and there. But I remember the time that he spent with me, right? And so when I became a father, and I really, I said, look, I've got a couple of responsibilities here. One is make sure you're food, clothes, shelter, the basic necessities of life.
Yeah.
But then you get to the mental and the spiritual and emotional side of being a father and what that means for your children. And I said, I have a responsibility to also raise them so that their moral compass is properly built. They're still going to make bad decisions.
Yeah.
We all have.
Yeah.
But you want to make sure their compass is set right, and that their ability to learn from their mistakes, they've created the mechanisms to be able to learn, right? So you've kind of got that responsibility as a parent, as a father, to say, here's how you differentiate between wrong or right, good or bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also I want my kids, not from a self-serving perspective, but your kids are your legacy. Now, I granted some
That's
people
right.
don't have children, and it's, in my case, I did. So my kids are my legacy. But if I didn't, I would say, well, the community is my legacy. Have I left it better than I found it? And so when you really think about it, like in 100 years, no one will care that I was president and CEO of the chamber. No one. They won't even do a history project on me. That's
Yeah.
fine. There's never been a driver for me. But one day, my grandkids may ask, my great grandchildren might ask my kids, what was your parents like, your father in particular? I want them to be able to answer. And I want them to be able to say it helped shape who they are, and then helped shape who my grandchildren were, and then ultimately helped shape my great grandchildren and so forth. So it really just comes down to, what do I want my life to be about, people or things? And the people I care about the most are my kids and my family, my wife. Everything else just is, community is important, clearly, but it starts at
Yeah.
home. That's a long
The
answer to
thing,
your question.
yeah, I love what you just said. I think a lot of guys are still wrestling with that, especially if we're from homes that we never saw modeling those things, especially when we're juggling between a family, business, keeping your marriage strong and, all that kind of stuff. What advice do you have for us guys who are in that season of parenting? I mean, you're still parenting, but a little bit more on the other side. If for those who are, let's just say, in the middle of parenting and struggling with that kind of balance, what was one of the challenges for you in parenting? Because you have good days and you have not so good days.
I want to be very clear too, because I'm also a hypocrite. It's easy at this stage in my family's, timeline, where my kids are in their early 20s. One's through university, the other one's moving on to grad school, and wants to do his PhD. You kind of go, their moral
Empty
compass is
nest.
their moral compass at this point. Their
Yeah,
beliefs, their values, and all these things
that's right.
are set. And it's easy for me to look back selectively and say, well, I did this right, and this was my thinking. But in the heat of the moment, I'm sure if I was able to go back in time and talk to myself, they'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? You never thought this
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But my advice is, actually, it sounds really weird. Anyone that knows me, when I was going through university, I worked at a video store. For those that may not know what a video store is, there was a time when you would actually have to go out and get a DVD or VHS tape.
Oh
I
yeah,
did the air quotes. And you'd go to a video store and rent them, and then you'd bring them home. So I worked there. And so a lot of my best life lessons literally come from movies, in a weird way, because I would listen to something, and if it resonated with me, I would then investigate it further. Like, one of my tattoos is my favorite biblical saying, Mark 8:36, whatever shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul. I first
so
heard
good.
that not in the Bible, but in the movie Bonfire of the Vanities from the 1980s, dating myself.
Come on.
The other one, and this is what's germane to your question, is if anyone remembers the movie City Slickers. There's these three guys, midlife crisis, late 30s, early 40s, kids, all that kind of thing, job crushing them. And so they go on this chuck wagon Western thing for like suburban, burnt out people, that are just trying to find purpose or that kind of thing. It's supposed to make
Yeah,
you recenter, kind of thing. And there was a crusty Chuck Wagon driver, played by the actor Jack Palance, who basically are sitting around the fire, and one of the actors, Billy Crystal, asks him, like, what's the secret to life? And he goes, you know what the secret to life is? This. Holds up his finger and just points, like, one. And so Billy's like, well, what is that? He goes, that's for you to figure out. But that's it. It's just one thing. Everything else is just noise. And that's so simplistic, and I recognize that. But applying that kind of thinking, whether it's in the present moment, the most important thing, my one, is this conversation with you. And so,
yeah,
you hear people say, well, I need to practice mindfulness and presenteeism. It really is taking that concept of one and practicing it in a physical space, in this moment, mentally, physically. This is the one thing. So, extended beyond just a moment, when I think of it, when I look back on my life, and we will, at some point you do that kind of retrospective. What has my life amounted to? Have I served a greater purpose? Is my existence something that will be a blip and no one will remember it? Did anyone bear witness to my existence? And that's where I
Yeah.
go, that's my family. Really, in this moment, yes, I need to provide for their food, clothing, and shelter. But whether I'm working as CEO of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, or before that I was with the federal government, and other that I was in different nonprofits, whether I never did a media story or not is irrelevant. I was going to
Yeah.
provide for my family. And if you have the choice, what's more important, providing for whether they have the latest iPhone or whether they have that moral compass? That's what my advice to men struggling with it is, just remember, you can't do it all. So what is the one thing that
Yeah.
is most important, that literally when you're thinking you cannot fail at this, that's your energies, that's where you need to set your focus on. Again, I recognize when it comes to advice, easier given than followed, easier to tell people what to do than for you to take your own advice. But just because that's my advice doesn't mean I've always done it and I've been successful in it. Knowing the right answer and walking the right path aren't always one and the same thing.
Well, you know what? I don't think any of us are perfect. And it is good, which is why the climb is so relevant, because it's hearing each other's stories and seeing how we navigate those challenging seasons. And yes, we will have days when we're in the valley, but hearing your story helps another guy on his climb going up the mountain. Like, there are lots of nuggets that you're sharing that he's taking away from whether your good moments or your bad moments. He's learning both ways. And so we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for what's the next step that a guy can take in that journey. I think so many of us struggle in an isolated way. Not all of us, but some of us have good friends. And that's what we're looking for, a community where men can just be honest about the journey so we can learn from each other. And you're definitely doing that. I think I should officially welcome you. Loren, it's a pleasure having you here on The
It's my
Climb.
pleasure.
Welcome, welcome. Just for our listeners, would you mind introducing yourself?
My name is Loren Remillard. I'm president and CEO of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, and been doing that for going on 10 years. Yeah, my story is my story, but like anyone's story, there's chapters that others would say, oh, it sounds a lot like my story. There's some overlap there.
Thank you. You sit on many boards. You're in many different leadership circles. Tell me a little bit about what influenced you or inspired you to get into the spheres that you have entered into in terms of leadership and community development, those things. What inspired you and what led you into that direction?
Wow. When I look back, I want to acknowledge a couple things. Well, one thing is that, you know, some of my journey has been scripted. I've written it, right? I've been intentional, focused, but I must acknowledge, and some of this might irritate some of your listeners or others. I don't know how they might react to it. I've been the beneficiary of some pretty damn good luck, right? Right place, right time. And I hesitate to say good luck because then that implies there's bad luck, and that what made me the recipient of good luck and someone else the recipient of bad luck. But I just want to acknowledge not everything that has transpired in my life has been because of an intentional focus. Sometimes, again, you're just, fate is what it is. So things that have influenced my life, it really, it starts with obviously my family. My parents were very big. I went to a private Catholic school, and of course, people have different views on private schools, regardless of religious denomination. They just, for them, I mean, I grew up in a Catholic family, but for them, it was more about they just wanted to invest in our education. And I remember asking them
Yes.
as a very young child, like investing in their education, because they were like, education is going to be what drives your success in the future. So they made sacrifices. I grew up in a very middle class family. I mean, anyone familiar with the Norman Rockwell painting? I literally had that. We had a white picket fence,
Love it.
and my parents had a small business. I saw them work hard, sacrifice. My parents' business, unfortunately, did not survive in the early 80s due to the economic recession. So I also saw the ups and the downs of the entrepreneurial journey, of the lows, right? The valleys you speak of. And seeing how they fought through that resilience, right? That
Yes.
determination not to get back to a material position of any kind. It was to ensure that what they had set out to do with us continued, because all three of us went to private schools while my parents were going through that difficult financial time of seeing their business close and having to reshape their jobs. So that was one, just that resilience and investing in that which is your one, that most important thing, and that
Yes.
was us. Also, my mother and my dad, a brilliant man, provided for his family in every way, shape, or form. Who I am today, very much influenced by my dad. So, but for my mom, early on, just my mom was the first female JC, and I think in Canada. For those that may not know what a JC, it was the Junior Chamber of Commerce back in like the
Yeah.
1950s, early 60s. And she was vice president of my dad's company when that was not really a thing that happened often. And my mom was just a strong, independent woman that just fought for her place at the table, didn't apologize for it.
Yes.
And it also shaped me to say, value the person, don't prejudge anything, right? Like my mom just, if you feel you belong there, you belong there. Don't.
Well, let me just say then, if you had a mom like that, that is the answer. You have no choice but to go in that direction,
Yeah.
because she's gonna influence the heck out of you, and moms lead the way.
I remember as a kid, again, another movie to give you an idea, just, the value and the respect and love I had for my parents. I remember one of my pets, it was a pet hamster, and I had accidentally dropped it as a child, and the screen door kind of hit it. And I was terrified that the poor thing was, going to die. And so I held it up to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, please don't let it die. Because that kind of idea that God is or mother is the name of God on the lips of children, that kind of idea, not to get
Yes.
overly spiritual for
Yes.
anyone that's listening, but
No,
I'm
go.
just saying that it's that level of motherhood, right?
Yes.
Like it's where life
Yes.
begins, and it nurtures
Yes.
life and it gives life purpose and these sorts of things. So that's on the family side. In my school, I went to a school where I remember my first day at high school in grade 9, school assembly. The rector of the school, principal, I guess, or the religious head of the school, walked in and just said, where was the principal? Either or. Walked in and just said, look, here's the bar. We don't lower the bar. We
Come on.
lift you up to the bar and exceed the bar.
I love it.
That is what we do here. Have a good year. And walked out. And I just remember thinking, like, that's it, right? Like, and then the school motto, which I still get together with one of my high school teachers. We became friends through the chamber because he runs a career internship program. And I remember telling him, I said, I still remember the school motto. It's burned in my head. I'm a gifted individual willing to contribute to a caring community. That was what they preached in you. You will be
So
a
good.
community leader and you will give back to community. And so when I look at my resume and I look at the places I've chosen to work, it reflects that. Nonprofit, government,
Yes.
you know, business leadership, serving on boards. It's all about, when I look back on my life, I want to make sure that my fingerprints are on things that helped make life better for someone that I don't even know.
Yes. No, I absolutely agree. I would use the term blessed to be a blessing, to whom much is given. And I think it is the journey that you've also experienced, where I think sometimes when we have certain resources, we realize, okay, I can help this person over here, or I can do more with what I have. And when you grow up in a family like that, that is entrepreneurial, they're creating things, they're making things, it's very natural for us to think that way. Like, if something doesn't exist, you're not just asking somebody, where is it? It's just like, how can I make this? How can I make this better? How can I serve people? And I think in many ways, I've also seen my parents do some of that, whether it's sending other kids to school who couldn't afford it and just doing other things as well. My dad also ran his own business. And so I think there is a internal thing that comes with just growing up with that, you think a little bit different, and you realize my dad says never let anyone tell you you can't, you know? If you put your mind to it, it is possible. So there are just certain things that stick with you and you're like, well, if it doesn't exist, just create it, you know? So I love that experience.
Everything we have
What would you
today, to your point, everything that we
Yes.
have today, this conversation, the ability to
Yes.
have this conversation, record it, podcast the world. At one point, somebody said that's impossible. Everything that exists today at one point was impossible.
Exactly. No, I was gonna ask you, what was a period that was most challenging for you, and how did you navigate that journey?
I don't know how you pick one. I think every life, there's moments that are down and make you question everything. A couple pivotal moments in my life. I mean, I was getting married. I was unemployed. That was a that
Wow.
was a that was a tough time, right? Because my wife, who's my world, you know, I wanted her to respect me and value me, and she stood by me. She knew that it was the '90s; it was tough. She was
Yes.
fortunate; she was a pharmacist in demand, and so forth. But she never made me feel less than because um, I didn't have a job. I didn't make as much money as she did. These sorts of
Yeah.
things, right? She just saw what was inside, and that's when you know you got the right person.
Come on.
So that was humbling. But then about a month before, I got the job at the chamber, which I worked for at about 7 years and then went on to others and then came back. But, that was a moment where I realized like my value, my worth isn't about necessarily what I provide financially, or even more importantly, what others think of me. And this is a big part. And that really was the start of this kind of thinking that I had is I worry about my character, not my reputation. Look, the fact is, I'm
Yes.
the villain in many people's stories. All I have to do is go on
Yeah.
Reddit and I read people basically calling for my death and using misogynistic terms because they misgender me, all these sorts of things. And so you realize these people
Yes.
don't know me, but they hate me for some reason. Okay, fair enough. I'm not going to change that. That's my reputation in one person's world. So be it.
Yes.
But my character, when I look myself in the mirror every morning, I need to be able to like and respect what I see staring back at me. And every day I do look in that. Trust me, every day. And there's days where I'm like, oh, you could do better. Other days I'm like, you're rock solid. But I worry about my character. And so in that moment when people are like, oh, how does it feel like to be unemployed? You're getting married in like 3 months and stuff like that. I realized they
Yeah.
were talking about my reputation, their view of me, as opposed to what my character was. And my wife reminded me of that every day when she said, I respect you, I love you, I'm marrying you, not a profession. So she reminded me she cared about my
So good.
character, not my reputation. And that has stayed with me because literally in this job or any leadership position you have, everyone will, you know, one third will like a decision, one third will hate it, one third will be indifferent, right? So yeah, I'm a villain in some people's story, but you know what? I'm the hero in the most important story, my own and my kids and my wife's. The rest, varying degrees of indifference, or yeah, he's a good guy, or yeah, he's not a great guy. So there's that. Sorry, I know I keep going on and on, but the second one
No,
too
that's good.
was when I was working for the federal government. I had been working there almost 10 years, and I actually made the choice to go there because the day I'd left the chamber and I went to go work for the feds. My second day on the job, my wife went into labor with our youngest, and part of the reason why I
Oh,
did make that transfer, I said my kids are at that point 2 and newborn, and I
yes.
wanted to make sure that I was going to be in a position that provided me that more 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, so I could be there, so I could coach their hockey teams, I could take them
Yes.
to lacrosse and volleyball and all their sports, and help them with their homework and be present for them at these formative years. So I made a decision to pivot
Yes.
my career around where they needed me to be. But also, I needed a change. If I'm being completely honest with myself, that was a big chunk of it. But also, I felt like and this is no insult to anyone that works in the public service, quite the contrary, I gained a great appreciation for those that work in the public service. But I also knew that I was comfortable. And that's deadly. When you're just,
Mm.
you could do your job while you're sleeping, comfort.
Yeah.
And I wasn't being challenged intellectually anymore. Career wise, I really wasn't growing. And I had to make a decision. Am I comfortable just playing it safe and riding this out till retirement? Or do I owe
Yeah.
it to myself, the 18-year-old kid that started university and then went and did his graduate degree in political studies that had bigger aspirations? Did I owe it to that person at that time and the one later in life that looks back on their life to say, I'm not going to play it safe. I'd rather try and fail than to spend the rest of my life wondering what if. And so I made the decision to come back to the chamber as a vice president, and now I'm the president. Now, could have worked out badly. Maybe I didn't become president, or other negative things happened. It didn't come out, but I don't ever wonder what if now, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the lesson I would say for people is, comfort can be a siren song, if you will, and
Hmm.
careful. Another saying, again, and this kind of encapsulates what I'm trying to say, is they said, the only people you have to make proud is not your parents, isn't your children, isn't your spouse. It's the 8-year-old version of yourself and the 80-year-old version of yourself. The 8-year that
Mm.
said, I had these dreams and aspirations. And then the 80-year-old
Yeah.
that's looking back on their life going, my life had purpose, meaning, and impact. And that's why I made the jump. I'm like, I owe it to both of them.
I like that you were mature enough to be able to give yourself the freedom to let go of something to take on something else, especially in the area of family. I think sometimes many of us are so driven, whether it's because of peer pressure or social pressure or just the status quo. For the guy who is in that gap or in that season right now, feeling like he has to, because I think just being a provider and a protector tends to define so much of who we are as men that we don't see the other areas, and it affects us in different ways, whether it's in our parenting or in our marriage or leadership. And it's almost as if, because I notice when I speak to older men, maybe in their 60s or 70s, and I'm like, what's one thing you wish you had done differently? They always go back to the whole spending more time with my kids or my family. And if so many of us say that, I wonder, why is it that in the moment we don't actually make the room for that? I just love that part of your story where you made some adjustments. It might not have been perfect, but you made some adjustments so that you could show up more in the areas that will matter most. How would you encourage a guy who feels kind of trapped between the status quo and the peer pressure and maybe the circle of influence? You kind of have to just keep up the image. How would you speak to
So
him?
again, a reminder, your reputation is your reputation. No matter what you do, right? Like if you're worried, if you're making decisions based on what you think others will think of you, you have no control over what someone thinks of you. You can make every right decision that is for that is possible, and someone will still think negatively of you, right? So worry about your character. Don't worry about whether you're going to be perceived as a winner or a loser. you know, Again, I'm very clear. There are those that I'm sure that look, especially early in my career when, I inherited this, I succeeded into this position from a good friend of mine, one of my best friends, mentor Dave Angus, a legend in the chamber world, 17 years in the role. And then all of a sudden, like, who's this, guy? And many
Yeah,
probably questioned, is he the right guy? I
yeah,
did. I mean, the imposter syndrome, you wake up every morning going, did the board make a mistake? I hope not.
yeah.
So don't worry about the noise external. Worry about the noise in here that is who you
Yeah.
are. And secondly, also acknowledge that I was in Kananaskis. I'd taken our family. We'd gone to Banff, and my brother-in-law and his kids. We took all our boys. It's all boys on my wife's side of the family. No one had daughters. It's like 7 boys of the cousins.
Wow.
Anyways, so we went whitewater rafting in Kananaskis. And I remember going through it, and then as I reflected on it later, I was like, that's kind of like, for me, a symbolism of life, right? because, and whether you believe in predetermination or fate or anything like that, but generally I kind of looked at my life and going, well, look, I started and it's going to end, and it's a river and it flows, and there's going to be periods of calm water, periods of choppy water, and we're fighting to have this sense of control, right? We're in control of our lives, and we'll dictate everything, but the reality is you can't. You're not going to ever control everything in your life. You can control some things. You can control your decisions, how you can control your attitude, what happens, and all this. But then I remembered, okay, well, in some periods you just sit back, even in the choppy water, and you just ride it out. You don't do anything. You just let it take you.
Yeah.
Other times you're paddling. You're trying to determine where in that wide river you're going to try to get to. But at the end of the day, the river's still taking you where it's going to take you. So sometimes in life, you just have to recognize this is when I paddle and this is when I just sit back. And so when they're struggling in moments, it's like, stop trying to control every, moment on that river where you're paddling like mad, because you get exhausted,
Yeah.
you're going to miss the times when you need to just sit back and enjoy. Maybe some might think
That's a good. I like the analogy of how you use that kind of rafting to take us through those seasons. What's one book or resource that you would recommend that's been very transformative to you as you've been through different seasons?
There was two books. One book I read, a friend of mine recommended. I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head. I think it's like Raising Healthy Boys. When I had my youngest was born, and then a friend of mine said, "Here, you've got two boys. Here's a book," and it basically talks about, it's not, it doesn't go into the whole toxic masculinity thing or anything like that, but it basically says competitiveness is part of our DNA. And it talks
Yes.
about
Yes.
wolves, right? And it constantly references a wolf pack and so forth. And by the way, I'm not getting into anything heavy here on toxic masculinity or anything
Yeah.
like that. All I'm saying is this one book, it basically said, look, your boys are going to be competitive. They're going to fight. And they do that physically. That is how they're
That's
wired.
normal.
And your
Yeah.
job is to channel their competitiveness, not to constrain it, not to
Yeah.
drive it out of them.
Quench it.
It's to channel it
Yeah.
to healthy endeavors, and recognize that when you're competing against each other, how do you get their competition to work around a unifying goal and all these things. So it was actually good in terms of parenting for me to be able to
Yes.
say, how do I raise healthy boys, and healthy on all sorts of metrics. The second one, and a
When you,
professional one, and again, I might have the
yeah.
title wrong here, is The 5 Mistakes of CEOs. And I was just new to this role, and my counterpart at the time at the Calgary Chamber of Commerce sent me 2 books, and this one I read pretty fast, and I remember the one thing that just, there was 5 key mistakes, but the one that really stuck with me says a lot of CEOs, they go for to be liked as opposed to be respected, right? And I think that transcends to our life, right? Everyone
Yeah.
wants to be liked. Look at our whole social media is based on likes. Some complete stranger that
Absolutely.
you'll never encounter with, that
Yeah.
has no impact on your life, but man, you get a like, you're liked, what you're thinking is liked, all of a sudden you have value. And but the idea is, like, not everyone's going to like you.
So
If
true.
you try to strive for you won't be effective. But if you strive to be respected, where here's the rationale for my decision, I'm not justifying it, I'm explaining to promote understanding, recognizing you will make mistakes that others will go, see,
Yeah.
the guy's an idiot, or she made a
Yeah.
mistake, all these kind of things. If you're comfortable with that, comfortable in your own skin to say, I'll make mistakes and this and that, but if I embrace the challenge and bring people in to foster understanding, they might not like the decision, but they'll respect you.
Yes.
That's the best you can hope for. And generally, if you're
Yeah.
respected, I think you'll be liked by the right people.
That's right. That's right. No, that's right. That's right. Because I think also with respect is that, people might pull you aside and say, you know what? you're being a jackass or whatever, but I like what you stand for, or I like your, you know, your principle behind so and so. And so I think the respect brings that extra edge to where you might do something wrong, but they're still in your
Yes.
corner. And I think that's the difference between somebody respecting you versus like you. Like, it's so cheap. So people just like, you know what? They leave you just in the moment when you really need them. And I think you, as you said, the right people will stick around for the long
Yeah,
haul.
respect isn't easily taken away. You need people to respect you, especially when you're wrong. If they only like you
Exactly.
when you're right, they'll abandon you the
Yeah,
minute you're
yeah.
wrong.
You don't have the right people around you. No way. Oh my gosh. This has been such a good conversation, Lauren. I really love the nuggets you've shared, some of the principles that has carried you over the years. And I believe there's just a lot of takeaways from this. Is there any final thing that you'd want to say to the man who's listening right now?
You know, and I would say it's not just for men, but for women, for, you know,
Yes.
we're inundated in our lives with people telling us what we should be, right? The getting shoulded to death. I really, where I think I found peace, if you will, is, look, I'm not racing anyone else. Like, yeah, I'm in business. I'm constantly in competition. Competition with other business organizations, competition as a community with other communities for business, all these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, we started the race by ourselves, and we'll finish the race by
Yeah.
ourselves. And you know, it's your race to run. And again, one of my other favorite sayings is, you know, I fought the good fight. I finished my course. I kept the faith. Find your purpose, quiet the noise as best you can from outside, and just run your race. Don't worry if someone passes you. There are better leaders than me out there. Numerous better leaders that I learn from constantly. I'm not worried about besting all of them. I'm worried just about pacing myself and bringing my best every day. And literally, you know, I guess that's where I really started to just come in this job, in my life. I'm just running my own race. And I've got a lot of people cheering me on. That helps. I've got a lot of
I like
people
that.
giving me strength and courage, but it's your life.
Thank you. My book, Awakening the Hero Within, is coming out later this year, maybe sometime in October. And I love how you started off with legacy, because I think as we go through life, legacy is the thing that we're leaving behind, whether we're aware of it or not. And I think that's one of the biggest thing I touch on in the book. As we go through life as men, what's the legacy that we're leaving behind after you've achieved all your goals and been as successful as you hope to be? What is this legacy leaving, whether it's your family or your community or whatever sphere you've touched on? What is that legacy? And making sure that as you think of daily decisions, you put that into the whole perspective of life. It's just a pleasure getting to have this conversation with you, Lauren.
Likewise, thank you very much. I, I've enjoyed my time. I've enjoyed our conversation, and look forward to seeing you in person in and around our community at the chamber. So again, thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely.